What do you get when you combine vintage rail equipment and Amtrak? Today on the Roundhouse, we are taking a trip on the Hoosier State while it was operated by Iowa Pacific. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozarek, and this is episode number 56 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby, you name it, and we discuss it. Today, we are going on an adventure from Lafayette, Indiana to Chicago and back in one day on the Iowa Pacific Hoosier State. Now, the backstory of this is that Amtrak operates the Hoosier State service from Indianapolis to Chicago. But for the space of about a year and a half, they contracted with Iowa Pacific, who provided the equipment, and they provided vintage passenger cars, including a full-length dome. The other notable features of what Iowa Pacific was offering was Wi-Fi service on the train and hot, fresh meals prepared on the train by a cook for both breakfast going into Chicago and dinner on the return trip. So before Amtrak retook over operations in March of 2017, we took one last ride on this train, not just for the equipment though, but for the service that is provided by Iowa Pacific's car hosts and stewards. The trip, as you will see, was very unique, and I am pleased to share with you some of the stories that I gathered on that adventure. Good morning, America. How are you? We're waiting for the Hoosier State at Lafayette Station. It's very cold out, but we have a very beautiful and colorful sunrise to admire. That gentle creaking you hear in the background is a CSX Manifest freight train that's passing through the station right now. Train is delayed by about an hour and a half. By what the station master told us, it hasn't even left Indianapolis yet. We're looking at 9 o'clock, and it is about 7:15. We've got nice sunny weather, if cold, and we've got 3 tracks of main line. What more could you want? Once we boarded the train, we had the opportunity to sit back, relax, enjoy the Indiana scenery, and take in the dome. What a beautiful view. Now, domes, admittedly, really shine when you're in the mountains and you can make the most of that overhead view. But even on the plains, it's still wonderful. We also had the opportunity to talk with the crew about what their experiences had been like working on this train. What's your name and what's your position here with the railroad?
My name is Dylan Hayes. I work for Iowa Pacific Holdings, and I'm a onboard service attendant with Iowa Pacific on the Hoosier State train running between Indianapolis and Chicago.
Now, as I recall, the service started in the fall of 2015. Is that when you hired on?
Yeah, absolutely. The train started in August 2015, and I hired on in early September, so I've seen almost the entire, line and life of the Hoosier State.
Why'd you want to work here?
I wanted to work here, just to explore something that you never hear of. When you don't grow up, I guess, as a rail fan, you don't even know that these kind of things are jobs. And when I found out about something like this, I was like, I have to try it. You got to try something like that you don't hear about.
In some ways, you don't hear about it being jobs because it's rare for it to be a job. As you've noticed, there's a substantial amount of passengers who are paying their farewell respects today on the train because this type of thing is incredibly rare. So it's interesting now that you've gotten to be a part of what's now becoming history. How do you feel about that?
I think I'm going to look back on it as something that people are going to miss more than anything. It's something that people that commute on this regularly are going to miss, the type of service that we offered. And I'm not sure exactly what Amtrak plans to do with it, but I know what we were doing. People were very pleased with it. I just really enjoyed working here, and I felt like my time was valued and that I actually got to see some things happen and change on this train, and that I influenced, which in a lot of jobs at a lower level you don't really have a lot of influence sometimes, but on this you do.
When you interacted with the regular commuters, did you yourself take this train before Iowa Pacific took over the operations of it? Or did you hear stories from people saying, wow, it's really changed, who were used to it being the Amtrak equipment and then getting this as a change of pace?
Sure, yeah. I had ridden the Cardinal a few times before I ever started working here, which was the previous Amtrak train running on this route. And they also had the Amtrak Hoosier State, but I had not been on that. So I've never seen the previous iteration of the Hoosier State. As soon as I started working, every person I met who had ever ridden the Hoosier State before, they know that this is better, and they're really gonna miss it. And that's why everyone's here today.
What have been your typical day-to-day tasks? What does it take to be car hosting for the entirety of the round trip from Indianapolis? It's 6 a.m. departure, back to Indianapolis at midnight the same day.
It takes time. It takes a lot of, I would call it almost a lifestyle change. You're working, you're working almost 24 hours, or at least gone from home. But then you have days where you have 24 hours, completely away from work, 3 or 4 days a week. You have to get used to sleeping more when you have time to sleep, and being able to be awake when you need to be awake, it's just very irregular. The days you work change almost every week, so you have to get used to the kind of spontaneity of the job.
And then in terms of what you're actually doing during that time, you're helping to get the meals out, and by what I've seen, and feel free to expand upon this, you work to get the meals out, work to get the table set, and in particular during that layover in Chicago, which we're coming up to shortly. That's correct?
Sure, yeah. So for the most part, I would consider myself in the food service business. It just happens to be on a train. But there are other things that go along with it, such as Iowa Pacific has their own dispatching, so we keep track of dispatching even though Amtrak is also doing it on the train while we're doing it, either as a double check or second measure. We also turn in our times, times we arrive at places and depart, delays, passenger counts, people that get on the train, people that get off. There's a small bits of paperwork to deal with, just closing sales and keeping track of inventory and things. But for the most part, yeah, definitely a food service.
The $1 million question that I have to ask: how do you pour drinks on the top level of the car when we're on the rougher spots of track and we're waving back and forth? How have you mastered that art?
It's all about the practice. You will mess it up. I'm able to do it pretty well with my legs kind of spread out or whatever, but a lot of people have to grab onto stuff. It's something you got to be careful with because coffee is hot.
It's really interesting to see all the coordination it takes to pull something like this off. So even where it won't be happening here anymore, hopefully it'll continue in some form. After this, where could you see yourself going? Do you want to continue working in food service regardless of on or off a train, or would you like to stick to the railroad path in some way, shape, or form?
If I was working, I would say it this way, if I was working in food service, I would like to do it on a train. There are definitely other interests I have. I'm really interested in working field of parks and recreation and the management of park systems, things like that. But if I could kind of move myself up in kind of the onboard service world of trains, I would definitely take it up.
Thank you so much, Dylan, for your service this morning, and I can't wait for dinner service in the evening.
Hey, I'll be excited to see you when you get back. We'll be ready.
What's your name and what is your position here with the railroad?
My name's Aimee Skirvin, and I'm the chef on the train.
How did you come to work for Iowa Pacific?
I was looking for employment, and I applied on Indeed.com, and they were looking for attendants and chefs, and I applied.
So, were you a chef before you started out here then? And how many years of experience have you had?
I bartended for like 15 years, and I've worked as a caterer and a chef for the last 6 years.
How has working on a train been different from any of your previous jobs working with food before?
You meet a lot of different people, and just being like the train, the way it rides, getting used to handling the food and being able to ride and things like that, but it's a different experience.
So what's the secret to it as far as how do you not burn yourself or make things fall around? How have you learned to kind of handle the in-train forces?
You can kind of feel the adjustment when the train's going around certain curves and things like that. So you just kind of adjust with your feet and everything like that. They say I walk like a cowboy, but kind of like, but that's pretty much, I've had times when stuff's fell, things like that. Just kind of have to keep an eye out, so.
Of what's on the menu, we just had breakfast and I really enjoyed the cinnamon French toast. But what is your favorite entree or breakfast item that you serve?
We have a breakfast burrito that has sausage, green onions, and peppers, and cheese and eggs. I like that real well.
Now you're making me wish I'd tried that instead. If only I could come back and do another trip on it. Oh, well. So, as you go forward with your career from this, do you think you'd continue wanting to work specifically in food service on or off a train, or would you like to stick to the trains in some way?
I like working with the food service. I'd like to stick with the train, but being where I'm from in the area, it's hard to find employment, but it'd be nice, but I'd like to stick with the train.
Did you take Amtrak at all before Iowa Pacific took over the Hoosier State Service?
Right, no, I've never been on a train in my life until I started working on a train, so it was different.
So since this is the way in which you've been introduced to train travel, do you think it's something that you'd be more inclined to do because you were employed and now you have more experience with it, or do you feel like you've had your time being on trains and you'd look to do other adventures?
Oh no, I would suggest it. I mean, I would ride a train. I didn't realize what it was like, but yeah, I always thought the train being old-fashioned, but there's a lot of people that use the train, so yeah, I would suggest it.
Thank you so much, Aimee. Thank you for the wonderful breakfast. Look forward to dinner later and appreciate all your service here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're back on the train, back sitting in the dome car, and by the background noise you can hear, it is a packed house tonight, or a packed dome car, which is fitting that this train gets a proper send-off. So it's been a great trip into Chicago. Now we get to have a great trip back to Lafayette. I'm here with my buddy Zach Reitmeyer. Zach, what have you made of our adventure so far?
Trains, and more trains.
Yep. We did the Museum of Science and Industry, which has a fascinating collection, which you'll be hearing more about. And we rode Metra, and we rode the L, the famous elevated. So we've had the proper Chicago rail fan experience, and now we're going to be leaving the city in style. What is your name and where are you from?
Tunde Barbarinsa from Buffalo, New York.
You're from Buffalo. What brings you on the Hoosier State?
I live and work in Chicago now for a couple years, and I travel to Indy for work about every 3-4 weeks.
Why do you choose the train?
It's cheaper, and this business class is not bad at all.
Were you riding this service before Iowa Pacific changed out the equipment, the newer, fancier cars?
I was not, no. This is one of the reasons I started taking it. So.
What is your favorite part about this route and about taking this trip?
To be honest, the open bar and the good food.
I couldn't agree with you more. When they walked up this morning and said you get 4 free beverages and then the rest you pay, I'm thinking, wow, 4 is a pretty big number to start with, especially for breakfast.
I only made it through 3 a few times, so yeah, it's definitely worth it.
And of what's on the menu, what's your personal favorite go-to, gotta have it?
The burger, it's real good. Yeah, don't go for the nightly specials. The burger will never let you down. So, yeah.
That's good advice, because we're sitting in Union Station right now. We're just waiting to get underway for this, so the dinner options all look good. So having a local recommendation is very beneficial. So even once the equipment switches over, are you still going to be taking the train?
No, I'll probably fly down, actually, yeah.
So the equipment made the difference for you then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody recommended it. I even tried to say, why don't we go to Indy this week and regroup? I don't mind because of the ride. So.
There you have it, folks. From a non-rail fan, the equipment makes a difference, which, I mean, we knew as rail fans, but it's still good to hear it from your perspective. Thank you so much, Tunde, for joining us at our table, and look forward to a great ride ahead.
All right, thanks for having me.
I'm here with Jim Corbett, who is a historic passenger car restorer and a jack of many trades. Jim, thank you for joining us here on the Roundhouse. How did you get involved with passenger car restoration?
Well, it kind of went back to the early days of the Southern Steam Specials in the 70s and riding the Chessie Steam Special in the late 1970s, and just taking a walk one day, looking things over, and start asking questions and talking to the old car knockers and asking about this, that, and the other. They sat down and told me what the stuff I know now, what I've learned over the years, and I'm just interested in how people used to travel across the country versus like driving or taking an airplane or other modes of transportation. But this is a piece of the American history that's bygone. These cars were riding in the night. This car particularly built in 1950 by the Bud Car Company, Red Lion, PA, which no longer exists, the Santa Fe Railway. Santa Fe ran until 71, then the cars were acquired by Amtrak. They rebuilt them, ran them until they retired them. They got newer equipment. Then they sold them off to outfits like Iowa Pacific.
It's so great to be able to see these cars in service, and I imagine with your wealth of experience that every car has its own story and personality.
Yeah, all the cars on here, like the train we got tonight, from the head end, the engines were retired by New Jersey Department of Transportation, and basically those engines were built as freight units for the New York Central in 1964. Morrison Knudsen, who's a engine remanufacturer, took a freight GP40. He put a cowling hood on it, looked like an F40, but the front end still looks like a GP40. So basically the cowling holds not only the diesel engine and the generator, but also holds a head-end power package that supplies the electric to the passenger cars. So both engines are former freight units that have been re-geared and reassembled for passenger service. Now the first car in the consist is a former Santa Fe full-length dome car that was built for the Santa Fe in 1952. It traveled on such famous Santa Fe trains as the El Capitan and the Super Chief. There was 10 of these cars built. Iowa Pacific has 9 of the 10. BNSF has number 10. The car we're riding in right now is a former Santa Fe 56-seat coach that the IP rebuilt into a 32-seat crew lounge. This car was built in the 1950s, general pool service for the Santa Fe, traveling on all the major Santa Fe passenger trains until Amtrak. Then Amtrak took it and redid it until they sold it off and ended up in private ownership, otherwise Iowa Pacific. The last 2 cars, the third car in the consist is a former Southern Pacific 44-seat Bud coach, built for general service. It probably ran on the Sunset Limited, may have run on the Overland Limited or the one of the other SP trains. And the last car in the consist was built by Bud also for the Union Pacific. There again, the cars ran until 71. Then all your railroads divested themselves of all their excess equipment. They kept what they wanted for the business car fleet. The rest of the stuff was sold off to private individuals or Amtrak, or if the car was of age and Amtrak didn't want it, it was ultimately scrapped.
What's some of the work that you provided for Iowa Pacific?
A lot of the stuff that I do is specialized work. It can be anywhere from carpeting the car, painting the interior of the car, some electrical work in areas where things be replaced, like ballast and some of the lights. And there's a lot of us like myself that have collected parts over the years, and if somebody needs a part, we'll have like a little committee set up online. If somebody needs like a light lens or maybe a ballast piece or a reflector. Some of the work I did was just hands-on. It's just stuff that needed to be done. I mean, I did some of the electrical HEP power connections that were put on the car. When we got the car, all the HEP power connections were stripped off. So we had to check the wiring out, make sure everything was still tied into the main electrical box. Basically what I did, I just connected the HEP power cables on and tied them in, wired them up, and we tested and everything worked. And basically some of the other stuff I was doing was some framework, and a lot of it's cosmetic, just trying to clean it up, make it look like it used to way back when. And all the cars have got to pass a thorough Amtrak inspection, because you can't run these cars like they ran back in the 60s and 70s, where you used to call the railroad and they'd come over and inspect the car. As long as it had working brakes and toilets and windows you can see out of, they run. But nowadays they got to be, all the cars have got to be Amtrak approved. That means the wheels have got to pass, the truck's got to pass, it's got to have good HEP, good working toilets. You know, you're hauling the general public, and the last thing you want to hear from the general public is, oh, the toilet's broke, or I can't see out the window, or door hinge fell off. You know, you're trying to keep the interest of the riding public on these trains, and without good quality equipment, you won't have many cars.
Sometimes I imagine it's tricky to balance the historic preservation of using what's already there, or using what would be original, versus the practicality of making them Amtrak compatible in the 21st century, as well as suiting the needs that the car needs to fit. I mean, this car that we're sitting in, as you said, was converted from a coach to a crew lounge because that's what the customer, in this case Iowa Pacific, that's what they needed.
Yeah, this car was pretty much got it from the inside out, and basically they rebuilt it floor up. They checked everything, they put in new carpeting. All the seats are newer, and basically the same type of seats you would find like in an airline jet, where on the back side has a table that folds down. So if you got a computer, you want to do some office work, you want to eat your lunch or something, you got a table. Because in the old days, the porter or the conductor would bring you a table, and they would hook up in between the seats we're sitting in. You'd be able to play cards or type or whatever. It's nice to keep the cars original, but you also got to have seats that work, window blinds that go up and down, clean windows. You know, you got to make sure the chair can recline, because these chairs have got the leg rest, because this was a long distance coach for the Santa Fe Railway. So they got to have comfortability for the passengers, because first impressions go a long way. I mean, as long as you can keep a car looking nice, you get a good rapport with your general public, and basically they go away, then they want to come back because you present a piece of quality. Yeah, it's old, yeah, it's used, but if you can make it look like it was brand new when it came out in the shop 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's comfortable and the toilets work and everything works like it's supposed to, the people come back and ride. First, like I said, first impressions mean a lot in this industry. You got to have good quality passenger cars, because it's gotten to the point now you don't see many of the older heavyweight cars from the 1920s and 30s. Even the modernized cars are slowly being retired because they're tired and they've done their job. But most of the cars you see out here now were built probably 40s, early 50s. When railroads were re-equipping their big trains after World War II. So all the cars you see out here, well, it's like I said, were built by your Pullman standard. Most of them are Bud. You see a few American Car and Foundries, but most of the stuff you see on this train are all Bud. It's all Bud equipment.
Hopefully then we see a circle where, now that it's been enough time since the railroads of yesteryear were trying to chase off passengers, Amtrak's been working so hard to bring them back and trying to introduce amenities and conveniences, like having power outlets, like the fact that you can text and ride and do all these kinds of things that fit into the 21st century rider, who that person is. And hopefully that helps to bring the ridership back. And equipment like this could certainly help that.
Yeah, I think, as long as Amtrak keeps working at it, I mean, people come back to the rails. It's like I said, a lot of people won't fly. I've taken Greyhound, I've drove, but I'd rather just get down to the station, get on Amtrak, and either go to east down to Washington, D.C., or come up to Chicago once in a while. And there's a lot of guys like me that likes to go out and ride the rails. Today was just like a off day, but then again, this is the second last run of the Iowa Pacific's Hoosier State, and I wanted to come up and give her a good last look over and ride before Amtrak takes over in a few days. But no, this is what I enjoy doing. I'm retired now, so I kind of do this as a hobby. I own a couple of railroad cars I run on tours railroad down south, and I go out and consulting work, and I do slide presentations. I'm just very enthusiastic about the old passenger cars, how America used to travel.
It's good to have that enthusiasm, and on cars like these, we can share it together. Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
What is your name and what is your position with Amtrak?
Hi, my name is Rob Tracy, and I'm a conductor for Amtrak.
How long have you been working the Hoosier State line?
Since it's been Iowa Pacific since the beginning, so about 1.5 years.
And were you a conductor on other Amtrak services before then?
Yes, I've worked for them for 8 years. I work on the Cardinal and the Hoosier State train before it became the Iowa Pacific Hoosier State train.
So when it became the Iowa Pacific Hoosier State train, what was your reaction? How did that change feel?
I love this little train. It's been a great little train. It's been a great opportunity to work this train. It's been nice to get to know the staff. So it's been a good train for me.
You came on the speakers in the Dome specifically to thank the car hosts and the crew that you've been working alongside. Because this type of crew is unique to this train, what has it been like to work alongside them?
It's a very professional staff. They've been very, very nice. They've learned a lot. They've came a long way. It's nice to have the added staff and just great people to work with.
You mentioned how the crew from Iowa Pacific has learned so much in the time of operating this. What have you perhaps learned from them?
Just that I really care for them. I don't know that there's any one single thing I've learned from them. We all work together as a team. We've learned how to all work very well together. There's some really crazy times on the Hoosier State train, especially in business class when there's 55 people in business class. So sometimes it's just a pitch-in effort from all of us. So the staff has just been wonderful. And the Amtrak staff that works along with them is a great group of people out of Indianapolis. So everyone's just learned. I think the most part is to learn to work with each other and just be very professional while we're on the train.
It's been great to see the team effort put in behind the scenes today to make for a really wonderful send-off. Thank you for being part of that team.
You're very welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
What's your name and what's your role here on the Hoosier State?
My name is Jack Sinise, and I've been with Iowa Pacific for 4 years.
So that places you as working for them before the Hoosier State. What were some of the services that you were doing before then?
The New Orleans trips, the city of New Orleans. That was one of my favorites. Was the steward. Waiting on people, serving them drinks, taking care of them.
When it was announced that the Hoosier State was being taken over by Iowa Pacific and you were going to be part of the crew for this, how did that feel and what has it been like to do regular scheduled service like this over some of the charter trips and the travel Pullman service that used to be offered?
Well, it's a little different, but I enjoy it. The early hours a little bit, but that's all good. It's a lot of fun.
I was talking about that with Dylan earlier. You're working something like at least 18 hours, but allowing for lead in and lead out time, it becomes almost a full day just nonstop.
Yeah, but you get used to it, just like anything.
What have you enjoyed most out of it?
I like traveling. I like going back and forth, especially to out west, going to different places.
Outside of this, would you consider yourself a rail fan or just somebody who has an appreciation of trains?
Oh no, I love trains too now. It's a neat experience. It's a learning experience. But it's so much better than flying an airplane. You get to view everything, and It's awesome.
We all here couldn't agree with you more. As you continue your career forward, would you like to continue working for a railroad? Is that an important part of how you'd like to continue your career, or food service? What is it you see going forward?
I've always been in the restaurant business, but I'm going to continue with the railroad. That's what my wish is, yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you for your time, and thank you for your service here on the train. I've had an excellent experience.
Thank you, likewise.
Ultimately, this was an excellent experience. I had a lot of fun, and it was really great to hear the stories of the crew and how much being able to be a part of this meant to them. Next time on the Roundhouse, we'll be visiting the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, which is where Zach and I spent our layover, and learning more about their railroading exhibits from both their lead curator and the designer of their model railroad exhibit.
And now, the question of the day.
In our last episode on the Roundhouse, we were talking to Bob Donnelly, the president of APRCO, which is a private railcar owners advocacy group. And we were talking about how interesting it is to own a private railcar. And I asked you guys, what railcar would you like to own? Many of you responded with some very interesting creative choices. This from Jeff Patelsky from Facebook. The California Zephyr set that just came up for sale would be very nice. Agreed, Jeff. He's referring to 4 cars, 3 of which actually operated on the California Zephyr, that have been posted to Ozark Mountain Railcar. Oh, that looks like a beautiful set. I agree with you there, Jeff. This from Carl Solomon, a combine, so you can take the model railroad with you. Now, there's an interesting idea. Half of the car would seat passengers, half of the car would be your model railroad. I like it. And this from Ken Dar on Twitter, Silver Rapids. It's actually for sale now. It's an old PRR car that was used on the California Zephyr. Ken picking out one of the 4 cars that was for sale. That Cal Zephyr set looks absolutely fantastic. I hope it finds a good home. The question of the day for this episode is, what passenger train of the past would you like to ride? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. You can comment on this episode. And we also have links to our social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, so you can join the conversation anytime you like. And it is a lot of fun to have you along for the ride. Thank you guys for listening. And remember, as always, that the Roundhouse is our house.